I want to welcome everyone to this week's meeting of the Tacoma Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness. And this morning we're going to get started with Verna Lilly doing our intro. So Verna, would you like to take the floor?
Okay, thank you. And Rob's going to put our community norms
Yeah,
in chat, which are mainly about courtesies to each other, such as not interrupting, or if you're doing something distracting, maybe don't do it. And
just
on
stop.
camera, on camera. Okay. Um, Trying to make sure that I had a picture that I wanted to put up. See if it can show. There we go. Okay. All right. So good morning, friends, and welcome. We come together each Friday with a common goal to end homelessness in Pierce County. We bring our lived experience, expertise, and group wisdom to this effort. We feel the responsibility that goes with the privileges we enjoy, not by right, but at the expense and effort of others. Pierce County is located on land stewarded by Indigenous people long before we came. It enjoys an infrastructure built by the labor of immigrant and oppressed people who endured injustices that continue today. We acknowledge our responsibility to do our part to right wrongs, to respect each person's human dignity regardless of circumstance, and to work for the common good. We all know how to work hard, and we are willing to do this hard work. Today, I'd like to think about hope. I want to share a picture and wonder what it would look like to look at all the hopelessness around us. There we go. Let me get that up there like that. Everybody see that okay? There we go. That's what I was trying to get. So the Japanese art form of repairing broken pottery is called kintsugi, gold joinery. It encompasses concepts of acceptance, non-attachment, and change. This art form is widely admired for its symbolic and metaphorical meanings, in addition to its beauty. In kintsugi, a broken object is carefully repaired, but the cracks are not hidden. The golden lines highlight its history and beautify it. Kintsugi also preserves the object so that in addition to being beautiful, it's usable. This adds yet another layer of meaning. We're surrounded by broken systems, broken-hearted people, and broken places within ourselves. Kintsugi reminds us that we can take all this brokenness and make something beautiful and functional. Speaking for myself, I'm inspired by working with all of you. Just knowing that there are people like you in this world gives me confidence that together we can create an amazing work of kintsugi in our community. What inspires hope for kintsugi within you? If anything comes to mind, I invite you to put it to chat. Thanks very much. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Verna. That gives us something to think about as we get started this morning. Um, at this time, we'd like to invite folks who are new to the coalition or who are rejoining after a bit of time away to, if you would like, to introduce yourself to the rest of us here in the room. We've got 43 of us right now in today's meeting. This is not a time for a long introduction or overview of the program that you work for, but it is an opportunity to just say hi, let us know what organization you might work for or what part of the county that you is your community essentially, and invite folks to just come on, either put up your hand physically if you're on camera, or you can use the raise hand function in the chat to do that. If you uh, are part of an organization that would like to do an introduction to at a future coalition meeting. Teresa Power Drudis is the person who you see her waving her hand there. She's the person who coordinates our partner spotlights that we have most weeks, and she'll drop her email in the chat so that you can connect with her for a partner spotlight at a future meeting. So, if you're new, please take a moment now and introduce yourself. And it's perfectly fine if you don't want to come on camera and put that attention on yourself with an introduction. You can also introduce yourself in the chat. I do want to remind folks that we have a very active chat during these meetings, and that's perfectly fine. It's not a it's not a distraction from the rest of the work that we do. Please continue to do that. And one more opportunity if somebody wants to introduce themselves this morning. Yeah, Tia, if I didn't mispronounce your name.
Hi everyone. My name's Thea Phoenix. My pronouns are they, she. I work with the Mockingbird Society and I'm located in Tacoma. It's where I've been born and raised, and I am really interested to see what kind of work folks have been doing in the area. And I heard about this group and I wanted to come check it out, see all the stuff y'all are up to. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Thea. Good to have you here. All right. As I said earlier, if you do want to introduce yourself in the chat, that is also an option. Let's shift over to the first item that we do on our agenda every week, and that is to talk about what changes we're seeing on the streets. And I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to well, I should have queued this up. Take the opportunity to share a quick update about the weather and what folks are going to be experiencing this week if they're currently living outdoors. So let me share my screen briefly and mention that we do have a spell of hot weather coming up Monday and Tuesday of next week. According to the forecast, what you're seeing on screen here is the National Weather Service heat risk map for Monday, and you'll see that much of Pierce County is at the moderate heat risk or orange level, which is a trigger for the start of our hot weather response that we do for those who are homeless. Um, the only parts of the county that are not under moderate heat risk for Monday are areas that are really close to the water or up in the higher elevations in the mountains. As you shift to Tuesday, it's a smaller footprint of the county that is at a moderate heat risk, but it's still going to be a challenge for folks who are living outdoors. And as Sally and I were chatting about this morning, we know that when the weather gets hot like this, there are some parts of our community that are much hotter than even the forecast that you see from the National Weather Service. So if you live in places like the Hilltop, places that have a lot of pavement and not as much tree cover, you can expect even higher temperatures there. So the context for that is that obviously there's going to be a need for people to have ways to get out of the heat and for folks to get water and stay hydrated during the hot weather spell. Thankfully, this is just a 2-day spell, and it's not the kind of critical heat that they saw on the East Coast this week. Um, so let me open the floor to folks who would like to share what they're seeing in their neighborhoods. One thing that I will remind folks is please don't use an exact location. If you do have a concern about an exact location and some folks who might need some direct outreach, please send me a direct message in the chat, and I will be happy to um, reach out to our outreach folks and see if they can stop by the site. Verna, why don't you get us started?
I've got a happy one, sort of, to get us started. I want to do a shout out for Family Promise. They helped save a man's life this week. So on Tuesday night, I was out with an outreach team. We found a man who refused medical care, refused to go to the hospital, get an ambulance or anything. Early the next morning, I called Jan Runbeck, and she suggested that where he was located was within arm's reach of Family Promise. I called them, And shout out to Laura. She's here and her coworkers. They left the office, got in their car, went down to this gentleman, sat with him, talked him into calling 911, stayed with him until they arrived, and I'm absolutely certain that they saved his life. So shout out, guys. You did wonderful.
Thank you, Verna. And yes, please always do share those positive stories. It's helpful to reinforce that what we do is not in vain. So, anyone else with observations, concerns, or challenges that they're seeing on the streets this week? Sally?
Just to underscore the heat thing, this past Tuesday, the forecast for my neighborhood was 80 and it got up to 87 at our house. So that's how much difference there can be in a high pavement, low tree coverage area. So those of you who serve people in areas like that, be prepared that they might be more impacted by the heat than we normally assume just based on the forecast number. What I'm seeing in the mid-hilltop is a couple of larger groups, but a lot of single people just kind of trying to move around. The other thing that's interesting is with the stand down of the shelters, as of the time that all the stand downs are done, which Shiloh's already done, Alzheimer's underway, Brotherhood Rise is underway, the Hilltop will not be in the camping ban zone anymore. So that will create a whole new set of dynamics. I'm hoping the city will explain what the new rules are going to be before they go into effect, but it will impact how people are moving around and what sort of actions are taken to encourage people to move. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. McKinley.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. This is me in my community member hat. I have a woman that I've been working with her adult child to kind of coordinate resources for. She's homeless. She's a domestic violence survivor and still fleeing. She's chronically ill. She's blind. She's immunocompromised. She's living in her car. One of the biggest needs is for extra large overnight adult diapers. And so that's something that we've been trying to source. She also has very specific food restrictions because of her disabilities. And so it's kind of hard to access things that, food banks and that sort of thing might normally have. And we're doing some fundraising to try to just have funds on hand so that she can, we order things and have a person who's able to take them to her. But especially with the heat and everything like that, if there are folks who are able to potentially coordinate with me to take things to her or get things to me to take to her or visit her, that would be really helpful. She's done coordinated entry, and I know she re-upped it pretty recently. But it's just one of those situations where it's kind of, she's a person that's slipping through the cracks because of all of the systems being what they are. So I'll drop my phone number in the chat, and people can text me if they have resources or want to help coordinate or contribute funds or anything.
Thank you for that, McKinley. And please note what Christine just dropped in the chat. She'll text you. Teresa, I see your hand up.
So first, I don't know if Christine dropped in the chat that we have a bunch of incontinence supplies down at the, okay,
She
so I
did.
wanted to make sure McKinley knew that. But I also, Sally, I've been curious if anyone is tracking how many of the folks, because there are a lot more, a lot more tents down in and around my neighborhood too, over the last couple weeks. And especially, I wondered about the closure up on Pack Avenue. If people are tracking where people have actually gone.
I don't know, Teresa, if they're tracking that or not. I wish people were tracking things for the purpose of serving them instead of for pushing them around. The other thing I've noticed in the Hilltop is some of the people who've been there a long time, people I've been talking to for years now, were gone for a while, and then they sort of are a little bit back. So there was some big shift maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I don't know. It's really confusing trying to figure out how people are moving, why they're moving. I've had trouble tracking it, to be honest, and so I don't know the answer to your question.
So I agree with you that it'd be really good to hear what changes we should be expecting, given that some of the emergency shelters are closing down. So I don't know if somebody from the city is in the room and could address it
They
today
aren't,
okay.
but I did get an email from Danielle that I can share some of that information when we get to the government updates later in the meeting. Um, but yeah, that's and I sent a question back to Danielle in response to her message, um, but haven't didn't get a response. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but what the story the city has been sharing is that they're transitioning folks from those shelter sites in either to other shelter sites or into housing options. But we know from some of our outreach friends that that has not been universally the case. And so there clearly are people who are leaving, for instance, the Forging Path site down on 35th and Pacific and returning to the street. So we'll get back to that more. I was just looking to see if Jake was on the call because I know he had some direct knowledge, but I don't see him currently in the room. But we'll talk about that more in the city update. Anyone else? Excuse me. Um, Anyone else with updates from the streets this week that they'd like to share? And actually, let me go ahead and get that and directly answer that question now from Danielle or about the city, because why not? So let me pull up the email. So here I'll just awkwardly be reading a little bit from this, but then we can also chat about it. So what Danielle shared was that the Tacoma Rescue Mission Forging Path community, as of yesterday, there were only 6 residents remaining at the site. Previously, it held over 130 folks. So the Tacoma Rescue Mission runs that site, and they're anticipating that all of the remaining residents will transition to housing no later than the end of the day, Monday. That site is supposed to close on Monday, the 30th. The Brotherhood Rise project currently has 11 residents. That's at 23rd and MLK Junior Way. 11 residents on site, all involved in case management. They anticipate that 2 of those folks will transition into housing next week. That site doesn't close until July 31st, so they've got an extra month to wind down the tiny homes at that site. And then Alzheimer Memorial has been closing now for a few months, and so they've been reducing the number of folks who are on site. There's currently only 4 residents at Alzheimer, all working with case managers. The site is still supposed to close on Monday. So what I asked Danielle is if she could confirm where folks are moving, because there's a lot of back and forth about people returning to the street from some of these locations. Looking ahead, Danielle shares that the Bethlehem Baptist Family Shelter, Holy Rosary Safe Parking Site, and the Thames 3 Micro Shelter Village all have their operations extended through June of next year because of the $3 million in state funding that was allocated to Tacoma by the state legislature. So that's the update from the city. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Teresa.
I do wonder about what's going to happen to the tiny shelters. I keep not hearing that answer as we go through this. And there's a lot of people put a lot into building those, and they are certainly better than tents. So what's the proposal?
Yeah, I know we've asked that question multiple times and not really had a solid answer. I think that's something we need to continue to push on. Um, uh, the especially with the Forging Path site that is closing on Monday. Jan, I see your comment in the chat that yes, Tim's 3 is the 6th and Orchard site that serves primarily families. So I'll let folks know if I see if I get further response from the city to my questions.
Hey,
Yeah,
this is
Jessica,
Jessica. So I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to do my hand react thing because
you're good.
apparently I'm too old. So I have a question. One of the things we do a lot is we help people get their documents, right? And
Mhm.
I've been having one heck of a time. So I have a couple who's all of their documents, their IDs, their birth certificates, all that were stolen. So of course, first you have to call Utah to get a birth certificate sent. However, they don't have an address. So they go to Associated Ministries to try to get a PO box, but a lot of the places won't send documents to PO boxes. Like the Department of Licensing won't send to PO boxes. So and then also when you go to get a license, you have to put your address in there in order for them to send it to an address. Well, as you know, as a caseworker, I'm not willing to give everyone my address to,
Right.
and I mean, yes, I can have things sent to, sent to our headquarters, but I'm just wondering if anybody has any advice or input. The other thing that I am noticing is uh, I just saw Tacoma Rescue Mission can be used as a mailing address, and that's awesome. Um, but I feel like everybody's getting tired because
Yeah.
people aren't as available. So Social Security, you can only call them after 3, to make an appointment, and even then it's a crazy hold. Licensing, you have to make an appointment, and it's a crazy hold. Like I just hope, especially as the heat gets worse, people like particularly front facing folks, that they get themselves enough uh, uh, internal help so that they can stay friendly and stay engaged and stay helpful to the people that they're serving, because it's been really hard out there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jessica. I know replacing documentation has always been a huge hurdle, and has had additional challenges thrown in the way by staffing cuts and those sorts of things at the federal agencies, especially that issue that information. So appreciate that, and those are always great questions to raise here because among the 60 of us in the room, there are a number of folks who have dealt with these issues. Anybody on the call from Associated Ministries that wants to weigh in with thoughts on that? It's possible maybe you can see something in the chat as well. And Davina, thank you so much for responding in chat. Um, Before we close out the On the Streets segment this morning, I do want to just give a quick heads up if it wasn't clear earlier that it's quite likely at least Monday and Tuesday mornings that we will have inclement weather check-in meetings at 8:30 each morning. That call will be coordinated with the folks, our friends at Pierce County Human Services, but don't be surprised if you get an invite to a call on Monday and Tuesday morning with the heat risk at the levels it is. All right, so let's move on to our partner spotlight. And I want to thank Cynthia for stepping in this morning to give us a little bit of an overview of some of the primary candidate forums that are available for folks and where they can find them and why it matters. So Cynthia, it's all yours.
Thank you. Today I'm representing the League of Women Voters, not the COC. And so for those of you who don't know, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any candidates or any political parties. What we do is we provide forums for various races that are on the ballot, and try to get as many candidates to participate as possible so that voters can have a side-by-side view of how these people are presenting themselves and what their issues are and that kind of thing. This year, we have a particularly challenging set of issues because it's the local level, it's not the statewide or the legislative races, it's the local races, which is a huge number of jurisdictions, all of the cities, all of the special districts, school districts, fire districts, a whole range. We at the league cannot accommodate that many forums. And so what we are doing is, and we do this every year, is in the primary, we have races that have 3 or more candidates, and that narrows it down a little bit. And then we do a lot more during the general election. So I'm going to post a flyer in the chat in a minute or two that has the 10 that we still have upcoming. And then we will be posting our recordings of these forums on our website so that you can see them later. We know that very few people are signing in at the time of the forums, but a lot of people are watching the videos later. So it's really beneficial to do it that way. We used to do them in person, and during the pandemic, we stopped doing that. And we found that it's a lot more functional for us to not have to go out and set up and rent rooms and that kind of thing. So we're doing them all on Zoom. I don't know if Teresa has some additional forums to announce, but I will post ours. What I want to say about the importance of this election is that, as Verna pointed out in her opening comments, this is we have a lot of broken systems. And this is affecting local government very, very much in this coming, in these next few years. First of all, we have a statewide shortfall in revenue that is affecting local governments as well. And there have been budget cuts and a variety of things that local governments might have expected funding for. Secondly, we have this massive change in the federal funding system where it's anticipated that Medicaid funding in particular will be very much cut back, which will create lots of problems for local jurisdictions. And in addition to that, some of the grants that were awarded in advance and are would have been available are not being they're not going to be accepted by anybody in the state of Washington because the contract terms were changed in such a way that it violates a number of our state laws, not serving immigrants, not serving LGBTQ people, agreeing not to have any abortion services, and so forth. But most of all, also agreeing to comply with any future, which is unknown, executive orders. And on top of that, they've added terms that say, if you do any of this, even after signing the contract, you're subject to criminal penalties. So a lot of the funding that had been anticipated is not coming forward. And this will have an impact on transportation, on healthcare, and all kinds of, and housing. So the local governments this year are going to be really strapped for how they're going to address homelessness in particular, and how they're going to address the increase that is likely to come as a result of some of these other cuts. So in addition to that, this is the year that Pierce County is having its Charter Review Commission startup, and that comes about every 10 years. So there are a huge number of candidates that have filed for positioned on that Charter Review Commission. It was way too many for the League of Women Voters to actually have a candidate form for those. So what we've done is we've sent out a survey and asked for written information. And by the end of next week, we will be publishing, and I will send you a link to it, the side-by-side of all of the candidates' questions, answers to the questions that we've asked. And there were only 4 of them, but there are a lot of positions. So it's a lot of reading material. We're setting it up in a way you can search for particular people or particular districts. So anyway, that's kind of where we are right now. Again, we have 10 forums coming up in the next 3 weeks, and we have some that are already on, some have been posted online already. And we'll keep changing that schedule as we move from a pending forum to a recording. I would add one other thing, which is that these are subject to change because candidates change their minds. So we get some ads, we get some detractions. We do not do a forum where there's only one candidate for a position. So anyway, so that's what you can expect. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, and please feel free to raise your hand or use the raise hand function. Go ahead, Teresa.
So I just want to let people know that when I did a search for other candidate forums, the League of Women Voters is the one that kept coming up. If any of you know of anybody else who's doing a forum, not a rally, I looked at the Indivisible site and they are doing a candidate meet and greet, and that's a totally different thing. So I encourage people to go and get to know the candidates any way you can. But the forums I'm looking for are ones where you're going to have people who are vying for our votes for the same position. So if you have anything like that, you know, if I heard that Common Good is doing one, but I haven't been able to track it down, even though I'm very close to Common Good. So one of the problems is about getting the word out. If you can, please do get the word out about the forums that are coming up with the league, and we'll keep sending things out so that you know more about that. But Cynthia has been the bedrock of getting these candidates forums going in Pierce County, and I just want to acknowledge all of the years of work. And it's a heck of a lot of work, even being involved in just a little bit of it. It's a heck of a lot of work to make these happen. So please take them in and get to know who you're voting for.
Thank you.
I will mention as well, I believe Tacoma for All is hosting a candidate forum coming up for Tacoma Mayor. So let me dig up that email if you don't have it, Teresa.
Cool. If you post it in the chat, I'll put it into my list of forums.
And I think Daniel just mentioned that in the chat. So
I knew I could get some people to cough up this information. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
Could I add one more comment?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So one of the confusion points every single year is the difference between the League of Women Voters and a lot of other organizations that hold candidate forums. The ones that we do are for the public. They're not for any endorsement. The ones that some other organizations do are to endorse candidates. And so sometimes they get confused about the difference, but it's a pretty big difference.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Any other questions about candidate forums or related information before we move on to the next item in our agenda? Yeah, I think I want to raise up what Rosemary put in the chat. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you.
So important to be an educated voter. And with primaries coming right up, this is the time to learn. All right, so we can continue that conversation in the chat. Why don't we flip over to our next item on the agenda? And actually, the next two items kind of will bleed into each other a little bit. We wanted to talk this morning on what happens to be the last day of the current Supreme Court session. You probably saw a flurry of news alerts about Supreme Court decisions that have us all going, what now, this morning. And we thought it would be helpful today to take a few moments to mark the anniversary of last year's big Supreme Court decision in the Grants Pass v. Johnson case that essentially paved the way and made it easier for communities across the country to further criminalize homelessness. So this is the 1 year anniversary of that Grants Pass decision from last year. And there's been some activity happening here over the last few days to mark that anniversary and to kind of renew the call for solutions to homelessness rather than criminalization. And Teresa has put together a one pager that she can give a little bit of an overview of in the chat, but among the things that have happened, yesterday, the folks from the Housing Not Handcuffs organization, along with local congressional representative Pramila Jayapal, introduced the Housing Not Handcuffs Act in Congress, and there's opportunities to take action related to that act and urging members of Congress to move it forward. Um, so, Teresa, you want to kind of give an overview of what you pulled together yesterday? And you're muted right now.
I just put this in the chat and I realized I still have one typo to fix on it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, and I'll put the new one in right below it. So we're talking about the housing not handcuffs right now. And what I wanted to show you is that we do have some stuff going on, that it has been a year, and that the effects of this are that there's a lot more legislation out there, and there's model legislation that people have put forward. This decision happened and we all had a sense that it would affect things. I'm curious if people have really found a change in Tacoma, because from my perspective, things have not really changed since this decision. I think we'll see what happens when the camping ban can no longer be enforced because of all the closures. That may be when we see a change, but a lot of other jurisdictions have made changes, and you see that 230 of those have passed. So it's a little bit of a call to action for us. I'm curious about which jurisdictions have put together legislation or initiatives that have protected people's rights more. I know there's one in Oregon, not Idaho, of course.
Yeah,
Sorry,
not Idaho.
that was mean of me. But if anyone has information about those, I'd like to get somebody to come and speak during a partner spotlight about an effective initiative that's gone through that has helped to keep some of the rights that were protected during the ninth district's decision. So all of that to say, it's been a year. People have been active. We need to also promote model legislation that and like the one that's being put forth right now. So I'm very proud to have somebody that is our representative behind this. I don't know if Rob mentioned that it might have a snowball's chance sort of thing, given
I
the
haven't
current.
gotten there yet. I didn't want to dash everybody's hopes
All right,
immediately.
no matter how well that snowball does, it's important to have one in the fire. So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be kind of fun. This is a little more than a year ago. Just remind everyone of some of the things that we have done in the past. So when on the day in April last year when the Supreme Court was hearing the arguments in the Grants Pass v. Johnson case, a group of us gathered together to do an action down in front of the courthouse. And you'll recognize some familiar faces in these. I see Jan Runbeck there, Dion. Yeah, there's a number of us who were gathered alongside. There's Oneida, gathered alongside the streets, just to try to drum up and show that our community supports those who are currently unhoused. Um, Unfortunately, that decision came down on the last day of the session of the Supreme Court session last year. What has changed, I think, in Tacoma is that before the ruling, in this case, the city had not actually arrested or fined anyone under the camping ban. And immediately, the city argues that this was not the case, but immediately after the ruling, the city shifted its policy somewhat. They still have not been arresting and fining people excessively, but it seemed like the approach changed and that was more of an option after the ruling by the Supreme Court. There are a number of other communities that have changed their approach to homelessness um, since the ruling took place last June. Um, and you'll recall in California in particular, the governor has been pushing communities and urging communities to utilize criminalization and sweeps more because of the ruling that happened last year. So there has been a shift in tactics. What's clear is that we don't have fewer people who are homeless because of that change. And I know even in the hearing that or the introduction of the Housing Not Handcuffs Act yesterday in DC, one of the folks who spoke mentioned the fact that Grants Pass, Oregon, a year later still does not have a low barrier shelter for people to access. So there really hasn't been much in the way of solutions in the response to this. Um, I will mention that here in Washington, you might remember earlier this year during the legislative session that I spoke for a few weeks in a row about a bill that was House Bill 1380, sponsored by Representative Gregerson, that was about protecting the rights of folks who are currently homeless. That bill did not move forward and had pretty universal pushback from cities, counties, and the state sheriffs from departments from across the state, as well as the business community. So while Oregon did pass legislation that protects the rights of those who are homeless, um, and that have mitigated some of the challenges that were raised by the Grants Pass decision, the timing right now seems pretty tough to pass something like that in Washington. So, and then finally, I think what Teresa was mentioning in terms of the realistic prospects of the Housing Not Handcuffs Act is that clearly, in order to pass something like that through Congress, there would need to be a number of Republican lawmakers, members of Congress, who would need to support the bill. And right now, the majority of both the House and the Senate are Republicans, and so you need to create that that connection across the aisle in order to pass this kind of legislation. And it's highly unlikely in the polarized politics of Washington, D.C. that will happen right now. However, the um, the other challenge is that the White House in its this current administration, both in the Project 2025 documentation and in the executive orders and budget bills that have been proposed, is taking a much harder approach to homelessness, as well as to things like housing vouchers and programs that have shown themselves to be very successful, like Housing First as an approach. So I think it's great that we support and urge everyone to go take action and send messages to your lawmakers. That is important. But we have to be realistic that, we're going to have to do more than that to protect people in our community.
I do want to add that, yes, there is a link in that the sheet that I posted in the chat. There's a link where you can sign on in favor of this. And I think that's incredibly important when someone takes a brave move to try to do something that is nearly impossible. I also want to point out that we have a secret weapon on our side. And I'm going to share my screen. This is Lori Davenport, who is I think of her as our resident artist, because she does so much for the coalition. And I hope you can see that. There's some verbiage on this. She did a great job of taking the things that we talked about during the advocacy team meetings and re-upping the sweeps sheet, because the one we had before the question, are they legal? The answer then was no. But now the answer has to be yes. And so we updated it. Hopefully, I'm going to post this in the chat as well. If you see errors, if you want to join in with us on creating materials, please do. But that's our resident artist.
Thank you, Teresa. So we'd like to open the space to others if you have thoughts that you'd like to add to this conversation before we move on to our regular advocacy updates. Anyone? And I'm going to grab that flyer right now. Thank you, Teresa. You've been busy over the last couple days.
Yes, and Lori got out of a meeting this morning and made the changes and sent it to me in the middle of the meeting. So it's cool that she got it done.
Very good. All right, Jay, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
I'm on my phone today. Sorry. So something that has come up is with all the budget cuts, we lost 84% of the program funds for the AHA housing, which is the housing for homeless through Medicaid. It is a huge cut. There's many other cuts. We all know that, but this was a very promising program, and it will affect a lot of the plans that we had for the next 5 years when it comes to Medicaid assisted housing plans for homeless and permanent supportive housing. Our permanent supportive housing for Commerce Board lost 84% of its funding. So we are going through a massive shift right now, and permanent supportive housing is losing a very foundational support to improvement and stabilization and growth and support in just keeping what we do have. And these cuts aren't just here. This is like 2 major programs that have drastic cuts. So I just wanted to bring up the opportunity to please call your representatives, call the people that speak on your behalf in every level of your day-to-day process. The more ombudsmen, the more advocates, the more community groups that we reach out to and add our voices to, the stronger we get. And it is more important now than ever to advocate for the things that we are losing in mass scale from administrative practices. So thank you for your time. And thank you for everything that all of us do. And thank you for just showing up today and being here.
Yeah, thanks, Jay, and thanks for all that you continue to do. I know that it can feel like we're pushing giant boulders uphill right now. So, but if we step aside, that boulder's going to crush a whole lot more folks. So, thank you for everyone who remains engaged and then hands the baton to the next person. And we just have to keep building our ranks so that there are folks to help pick up that baton when the time comes. So let's shift into our regular advocacy updates. And Sally, did you have a chance to pull together some thoughts about the city and county?
Oh, I always have thoughts about the city and the county. I'll report on the meetings instead. At the city, there is a study session scheduled for July 1, which is Tuesday, typical time, but there's no agenda for it yet. There's no items for discussion, but there is a potential committee of the whole at that same time slot, but it's not posted yet on the city's website, so it's hard to know what exactly that is. The council is trying to organize the flow of work. They have a ton of stuff they have to work on. And they have a new committee called the Organizational Strategy and Administration Committee that's trying to organize all this stuff. And they're in the process of figuring out what goes to a study session, what goes to a committee of the whole or other type of meeting. And so while they're doing that, it's confusing. So I'll just say that. At the regular council meeting on July 1, there will be a Pride Month proclamation for people who might want to participate in that. And there will be a special staff recognition at the end, which typically is thanking the city employees with long tenures who are retiring, which will include the city manager, Elizabeth Polly, and possibly some other folks I don't know. So if you're interested in that, that's also on that agenda. At the county, on Monday, June 30th at 1:30, there is a committee of the whole meeting about the county budget. And we've heard a lot of information about the county budget lately. So if you're interested in following how the council is going to be dealing with some of those challenges, that might be a meeting you want to watch live or watch the video of when it's available. On Tuesday, July 1, the Health and Human Services Committee is meeting. They are looking at the county's housing action strategy and the Community Development Corporation report. That's all about affordable housing. So if that's something that you're interested in, watch or attend that meeting live or watch the video when it comes up. And at the council meeting itself at 3 o'clock on July 1st, Gary Gant is listed to be approved by the council as the new director of Pierce County Human Services. So that, other than that, it's a fairly short week because of the 4th of July holiday on Friday. So that's what I've got, Rob.
Thank you, Sally. And yeah, it is a short but busy week next week. I'm going to drop in the chat the link to a blog post from the Housing Alliance that the Housing Alliance will be hosting a couple of trainings next week regarding the House Bill 1217 and the protections against rent gouging. The first session is actually on Monday evening, and it's focused on folks who live in manufactured homeowners, essentially, people who live in manufactured home parks. The second training is on Wednesday night, and it's focused on people who are residential renters. So the key information is going to be shared. We're going to have folks who are legal experts from the from across the state sharing what tools are available for renters if they believe they are receiving rent increases that violate uh, the anti-rent gouging bill that passed House Bill 1217. Um, Sally mentioned the county discussing the budget and upcoming budget issues. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the state had its latest revenue forecast come out earlier this week, and the governor issued a statement on Wednesday regarding the over $700 million reduction in the projected revenues for the state that punch another hole in the state budget. Um, the update from the governor was that he does not think that at this time they need to hold a special session to deal with the issue, that it's something that is at a level they'll be able to deal with in their mid-biennium update during the short session coming up in January of next year. But the context of that means that departments across the state are being asked to make further reductions. And we know that that puts more pressure on the social services that people depend upon. So there's going to be, at the Housing Alliance, we're already looking at what priorities we will be pushing for in the next legislative session. And it's pretty clear that part of that is going to be trying to defend funding for programs like homelessness services across the state. And, hopefully we won't be having to push for hundreds of millions of dollars of backfill for document recording fees, but that's still a possibility again. So just be ready. There's going to be a lot to push for here in the coming months, not only at the local level, but at the state level. So I think that's it for advocacy updates. I don't want to always be so negative on these calls, but it's kind of the context that we're living in right now. I think all of us understand that, and it's really going to be critical that in our local communities we do everything we can to take care of our own, because the federal government's certainly not going to come to rescue us. If anything, they're doing more harm. Any advocacy related questions or other items that we should mention? I did notice in the chat, Daniel, thank you for sharing about the Tacoma City Council voting in favor of the Tacoma for All call for a study for social housing. That's good to bring into the space. Anybody else have anything that they want to share? And Mary, thank you for dropping additional information about the county council meetings in the chat. All right, so let's move on to our government updates. And I already shared what I had from the city of Tacoma. Do we have any questions, though, that folks would like me to raise up with the city? As Sally mentioned, with it being an odd week this week, um, we're not going to hear an update from the city of Tacoma again next Friday. In fact, we're not anticipating that we will hold a coalition meeting next Friday unless we feel the need to just do an on the streets update or any inclement weather updates. And at least right now, the forecast looks like it's not going to be overly hot for the 4th of July. But any other questions that folks would like me to relay to the city? Go ahead, Teresa.
Just saying, if we don't have a meeting next weekend, people can go to the protest that I posted there in the chat. Also, when you do raise up questions, I'm very interested to know if we're going to have any real information about what has happened to the individuals. I know it has to be, it can have names attached to it, but it'd be really good to know how many people actually are back on the streets. How many are they finding again? And that's something that it seems to me Heal could track that. And maybe they are tracking it, we're just not hearing it. But I'm very interested in how many times the same individuals are moved, and how much impact the closure of all these emergency shelters is having on our community.
Yeah, and Vicky, I see you came on camera. Do you want to address that? And welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And if you have not been informed, I've been appointed the interim acting director for Neighborhood and Community Services. And so I did just want to join you briefly, and I will try to come to these meetings the best I can, but we should always have staff here. As regarding where the people went, I'll reach out to Heal and get a response for you, some data for you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. That would be helpful.
And if there's
And
anything else that comes up, let me know, and we'll see if we can get our team to get you some answers.
great. And Vicky, just so you know, Danielle did send me an update from the city in email that I did share earlier in the meeting. So, and most of the content of that was just about the progress
change.
in standing down the shelters. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. So the last time I saw you, I was appointed the Systems and Strategy Division Manager. So it's the same face, just different duties. And I just wanted to make sure I had a touch point to you and let you know, of course, as always, if you need anything, feel free to reach out. My schedule gets pretty busy, but I'm always happy to assist wherever I can.
Thank you, Vicky.
Congratulations on your promotion. And I also wish you the best of luck in what seems like a very perilous job. So at least challenging.
It is, but with your help, we can't do this alone. And so I have a strong and good team. We have good community members. I've been here 30 years, and so I'm very familiar with the provider community and the work that you guys do. And so together we can make a difference.
Thank you, Vicky. All right, let's shift over to updates from Pierce County Human Services. Hey, Devin.
Good morning. Trying to get settled. I have three main updates for folks this morning. The first one is that the Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness Implementation Advisory Board is recruiting for new membership. The application closes on July 7th. I'm going to drop into the chat the link to become a member. And then at our meeting on that following Friday, we will be conducting short interviews of those applicants and then voting as an IAB to move applications forward so that you can become a member. I think, as some folks know on this call, we are amending the comprehensive plan to end homelessness so it aligns with the Washington State Department of Commerce requirements. And we're doing that work this year, and it is anticipated to be completed this year. And so the IAB is leading that work. So very important role if you want to get involved. The plan is not just a plan for a plan. The plan is strategies, accountability measures, and how we're actually going to do these things. And just for a little bit of historical context, when we initially wrote the comprehensive plan to end homelessness, Garrett Nyland, there was strategies embedded in that plan that we have done, and they are working. Shelter Access Hub, using ARPA funds to fund medical respite for our community, Spanaway Tiny Home Village, which we've made some progress with the new zoning. We utilized the plan, we implemented the programs, and they're working. So I encourage everyone to be a part of this next iteration of the plan, because we intend to have similar programs that we think will advance our system and make it more efficient, but also cater to the needs of people that are unhoused in our community. So that's my spiel. Please apply, come join us. My second thing is that the second comprehensive plan to end homelessness community feedback session is being held on July 19th. That's a Saturday. We wanted to give as much access as possible to folks. And so this second one is happening on the weekend. It's going to be at UWT at the Milgard Hall first floor from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we are looking for your voices. So please come join us. It will be an organized thing. It's not just a, opportunity for everyone to speak about homelessness, but rather to get us in an action mentality so that we can start to make some differences in our system. So I'm going to drop the link for registration. It does require registration. We had about 85 people at the last one, and it kind of maxed out our room. So we do need to limit registration for this event. My third thing and final, and Rob referenced this already, but we are going to be experiencing some inclement weather on Monday and Tuesday. Invitations for the inclement weather call have been sent out. We will have a flyer prepared today, so that will go out today to our providers, so y'all can start distributing that in advance of the inclement weather. And then thank you to Val, who has worked extremely hard on getting supplies out to our providers. We spent about $40,000 on inclement weather supplies in the last 3 weeks, and we have distributed them to providers that are willing and able to do the inclement weather work that we need done. Those included cold packs, otter pops, of course, tons and tons of bottled water. And it was in the name of making sure you have everything you need to address folks' needs in the community. So I would say we are prepared for Monday and Tuesday. So I will see a lot of you on that call. And then Rob, did you want me to cover the agenda for IAB, not this Friday because of the holiday, but the next?
Yeah, if you want to talk through that, that's fine.
It's super simple, y'all. What we're doing, and I referenced this already, is we're going to be reviewing applications for new members of the IAB and voting. We're also going to talk about the comprehensive plan. Sorry, you've heard a lot about the plan, but it's kind of taking up most of my time these days. But we will be reviewing goals 3, 4, and 5 of that draft plan. And those are the 2 items we will be covering. So that's all I got, and happy to take questions.
Yeah, any questions for Devin? Yeah,
Yeah,
Courtney.
Hi. In our last IAB meeting, we were supposed to get an update on the 211 system, both because we were making local changes, but also the Washington 211 has proposed some changes, and it got bumped for very legitimate reasons. But I was wondering if we were going to revisit that, come back to that.
Yeah, I do have a short update from United Way, Courtney. So I have the agenda open. I'll just add 5 minutes for that.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a question that's unrelated to what you've talked about so far, Devin, and that is any update on timing or when there will be information that can be shared about the point in time count in January? I know that there's been hold up because of all the changes at HUD and that sort of thing, but I also understand that some communities have found ways to still share that information about what the, or at least an overview of the information that they had from the point in time count.
Yes, we are very, very close. We have our raw data. We are building out the snapshot report, and we're going to build out that report a little bit differently than we've done in the past. We're going to include some more narrative information, some more historical information, not to be this super long report that nobody wants to read, but it's going to be a little bit more in depth than it's been in the past. I'm working with Carrie Moore from our communications department to get that completed, and it will be headed out to the community soon.
Great. I know that the information in the point in time count is not like the be all and end all, but it's a consistent thing that's done, and it's helpful to continue to have that as a barometer, as one of the barometers, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
And one more request for you, Devin. It's been a while since we've talked about the number of shelter spaces that exist in the entire system in Pierce County. And I don't expect an answer off the top of your head, but some of us were exchanging emails about trying to estimate what we think the number is now with the funding changes at the city of Tacoma. So it'd be helpful. I don't know if the county has produced an updated number of total shelter spaces that we believe are in the system, but it'd be helpful to kind of know what that is.
Yeah, we do have an update. To your point, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we did go through an exercise very recently. We try to do it very regularly because there's been so many changes in the last year, but we were doing an analysis because, believe it or not, we do have a lot of shelter beds coming online. I know we had some coming offline, but we have some coming online. One of those is Kingfisher Village. That's 60 units, 120 beds. That will be a row site for folks living in encampments. We also have the, oh, why am I drawing a blank? I will update everyone, Rob, and send it out. I don't know
Yeah,
why I forgot the
that
other.
would be great to have a sense of the big picture because I do know there are, additional locations opening some spaces, but then know that we have 150 sites that are being stood down inside that are funded by Tacoma. So it'd be good to have an idea of what the actual balance
Mhm.
looks like. And we also know that there's far fewer shelter spaces than there are people who are currently homeless. So
Do you, Rob, maybe want to put me on the agenda for next week and I can run through those numbers, or is your agenda already full?
probably not for next week because we're not planning to meet on the 4th, but the
Oh,
week
that's right.
after. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. That gives me a little bit more time to package it up too in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. And Jan has a question about the nature of some of the new sites. So it'd be helpful to have that kind of information too, if they're referral only or if they're sites that people can more easily access.
Yep, I can give that information with the update as well.
Great. Any other questions now that I've monopolized all this time with Devin?
Oh, I did miss one thing. Sorry.
Okay,
I
no
know
problem.
I'm taking way too much of everyone's time. My
No.
last thing is on Tuesday, the homeless housing program funding recommendations for the second year of funding were voted approved by the Pierce County Council. So that is our 25-26 funding for the vast majority of our homeless services. We did experience a 10% reduction in those contracts as a result of the question marks around federal funding. But we worked very, very hard to be creative and find ways to try to keep it as whole as possible. So that's the update there, and contracts are already in the works. We sent out all the award letters to providers yesterday, and we're going to get those finalized as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Devin. Let's move on to updates from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department.
Hi y'all. Man, it is a challenge to go after Devin. You do a lot, Devin. Appreciate you. For us, same. We're doing full deployments on Mondays, mobile outreach with the nurse on Wednesday and Fridays. Some staff are out today, so I will be with the nurse out in the field. This week on Monday, I will say that we saw more acute cases than we have been seeing, and that was in Hilltop. Um, I think one thing to note, shifting, is that I don't know if we've said this, but our plan now is to extend this program at least through the end of the year. So we're doing more outreach for some of those parking locations, which I think we're all seeing even more of a need because of just the logistics of the vehicle. And then third, the link that is live for outreach folks to send us to specific locations, to specific people. I think Isaiah has mentioned it 2 weeks now in a row. We have yet to get one response. So maybe somebody did submit it and it's not working. If that's the case, please send me an email. Otherwise, I'm going to send Jan Runbeck is having a time. Hi.
Hi. Yes, I went to the link. It was not functioning. I called Isaiah and Isaiah said, well, it's not been tested yet. So he sent me a web form, another web form, not the link that he gave the coalition under the chat. So there
Okay.
is another web form that does work. But I do want to give a shout out to the street van, mobile medicine van, because all things, when they fail, I call. I'm old fashioned. I pick up the phone and I call people I know. And Isaiah answered the phone. I told him about a particular person that I knew that was needing some attention pretty quickly. The street medicine van showed up, and I was able to pass off care from me trying to deal with a difficult situation to the street medicine van. So thank you for that. And thank you for not giving up, but your link does not work.
That's good to know. I
Yeah.
will, okay, then I'm not going to post it again. I will go dig into that.
Unless you fix it. I don't know. But
Yeah,
as of
that is
Tuesday, it
not
wasn't
something
working.
I can do, but I know the people who can do it. Yes, and I think when we can, right, arrive at the time, we're more than happy to do that. I think just like as we scale the program to larger commitments, right, then it becomes difficult to ascertain kind of like, should we leave this one place where we are serving people to go try to find somebody who might not be there, right? So these are just kinks that we're working out, and I'm glad that we have more time to work these things out. But the team is still very committed. Yeah, we're really excited and happy to be doing this work. And we also had a safety training where there's some things that it's like non-negotiable, we're not going to do, and then other things that we have had to figure out, right, to how to keep ourselves and our patients safe. So, example, no petting dogs. We won't be petting dogs, right? And there was an incident. So that is what I have. Folks, questions?
Yeah, any questions? Well, thank you for the update and for the sharing that the program is going to continue through the end of the year. That's
Yeah,
really good to
at
know.
least. And we're looking for additional funding. Uh-oh, Vicky came on camera.
I know this can't be good.
No, I wanted to share that street medicine's budget was included in the state's budget. It was approved in state budget. We don't know how much it is yet, and we haven't got the contract yet. But once that's done, Bianca will be in touch with Chantel to renew that contract. So you said through December, we're likely going to go longer than that. So just to give you that.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. All right. And how about updates from our friends over at Pierce County Department of Emergency Management?
Good morning, Rob. It's
Hey,
tough
Wyatt.
to follow both the health department and human services. We don't have a lot of updates. We supported human services with the distribution of 10 pallets of water this past week, which is pretty exciting. So after today, all of those will have been distributed out to providers. And then, as usual, our duty officers monitoring weather impacts. We haven't received any briefings from the National Weather Service yet, but looking ahead at the heat risk model, we may see some updates from them over the weekend. So we'll be sure to share those out as we get them and go from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Wyatt. And I will mention, I don't believe I've seen an update yet from King County about what they're doing with the heat. So I do think it's kind of a borderline event a little bit. So Courtney, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I don't want to get Wyatt in trouble, but I was wondering if Wyatt had anything to share on how DEM is impacted. Like you said, you're waiting to hear information, and that could be a standard process, or it could be an exacerbated process. And I was just wondering if the local DEMs are feeling a top-down, I don't even know how to say it politely, right? But like, is your functionality decreased because of the current situation?
Great question. Are you referring to like the federal funding situation?
Federal funding, administrative declarations, any and all of it.
Wyatt,
I
you went
think the
quiet.
other way of putting it is the current administration causing a possible lack of ability for DEM to respond in situations?
Oh, I see. Not to my knowledge. I would say I have not seen anything impacting our ability to respond. Um, I don't think that it's changed over the last couple of years, other than the improvements we've made. But I don't think there's any federal impact on us right now.
Yeah,
That
I
could
think the
change,
things
but
that have been in the news have been more about like FEMA and response to emergencies at that level. But yeah.
yeah, mostly it's right now the federal level. Obviously, all the federal grants are kind of up in the air, and so I know the county is working on how to kind of improve redundancies if we did receive those cuts, because we do have a lot of grant funded positions in our line of work and really in the emergency management discipline, but we have not felt those impacts to my knowledge. Great question though.
Thank you. Good to hear.
And that would be a great segue into the segment we're planning to end today's meeting with the new Pierce County Human Services Director, Gary Gant, joining us to offer a little more detail about what Garrett and I spoke about last week. So hopefully he'll be able to join us here shortly. Any other government related questions before we move on to talk about good trouble announcements and success stories? All right, we're tired of talking about government until we come back to that at the end of the meeting.
Rob, this is Alicia with the Hope Program. I'm with Gwen. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in and say that we have some vacations and other time off from our staff coming up over the next couple of weeks. And as mighty as we may be, we are very tiny. So we have been able to coordinate, but we will not have service tomorrow. But we will have service the rest of the weeks, upcoming weeks so far. But just in case anybody is in need of reaching out, you can always email that email or call and I can try to assist, but we won't actually be out and about tomorrow.
Thank you for that update. Garrett.
I was going to do a little update on the Unified Regional Approach Finance Task Force. So
Perfect.
thanks. We had our final of the first round. So there's basically 2 rounds of meetings at each of the task force. So there's 3 different task force working on different things on the Unified Regional Approach. I am on the finance task force, and we finished up our kind of first set of meetings with recommendations that are being taken to the staff members from the different jurisdictions, and from there to the electeds of the jurisdictions that'll then process it in some way and send it back to us. And then we'll have another set of task force meetings with their responses. And I don't have a lot of exciting stuff to report out of that. I'm actually a little puzzled as to what we've created. One of the things we talked a bit about was looking at a regional approach to contracts, which I don't think will fly with any of the jurisdictions. In other words, having an entity like the King County's Homelessness Authority or whatever that's called, that brought funding from the city of Seattle and from King County into a central place and did contracting from there, which is a neat idea. But I don't know how practical or realistic that is in Pierce County with Pierce County and Tacoma. So I think that is moving up. We were supposed to be looking at additional revenue sources. And while we did have a number of different potential revenue sources discussed, we didn't really talk about how much additional funding was needed for the system. And we didn't talk about how much money each of those potential revenue sources would generate. And so for me, lacking any connection with what we're trying to do, it sounds to me like we're recommending the electeds consider taxing people more to fund a homeless system. And that sounds lovely to me when you tack a bunch of goals associated with it. Like, I would like to create enough shelter beds for everybody, so I would like to introduce this funding stream that'll create 57 million or $22 million, which will cover our $18 million cost we associate with funding shelter for everybody, right? Like that. And so I think that stuff's gonna get put in somewhere down the line. But that was something I was expecting to be working with actual numbers. And I'm gonna hopefully do a wrap up email about it. I was going to do one at the last meeting, but I felt like it was a lot of just level setting. In this most recent meeting, we were kind of working in generalities, and so it'll be interesting to see. So I'll write out what the different recommendations are we actually send in, and then kind of how they get processed by the jurisdictions. I don't know if anybody has any questions. And there's other folks here on the committee, that finance task force, if they want to chime in with something additional. But so not a bad process. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what folks will do with what we created because it doesn't have the level of detail that I like to work with.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the update. I think, we shared Sally and I shared our experience with the governance group. Similarly, not at any level of detail in proposals from that group yet. I think the next big milestone that's coming up is July 18th, when the elected leadership group for the Unified Regional Approach meets and hears about the progress from the first round of task force meetings. And that'll be interesting to see if there's any real progress or direction from that. I don't know that hopefully a bunch of us will be able to attend or observe that meeting, even though we don't really have a formal role in it, to kind of get a sense of where this whole process is going.
Yeah, we were invited to that meeting, but I didn't get a sense that it was open to the public. So,
Yeah, I don't know that it really is.
which is another beef I have with this process.
Me too.
They identify transparency as one of their priorities, and it's not particularly transparent to people that haven't been selected to be part of the process, which is maybe not a bad decision, but it wouldn't have been my decision. But
Yeah, same. Jay, I see your hand up.
I believe there's also a staff meeting before that, and they're supposed to be open to the public to view, not comment, not interact, not anything like that. But we're supposed to have the ability to see what is happening. And to be honest, staff is usually where the choices are made, where we get the biggest chunks of information, and where we see the heaviest load of decisions to be presented. So if we really want to see this process on the internal side of it, it might be a good idea to view the staff meeting.
Devin?
Yeah, just one thing really quickly I wanted to add. Jay is correct. Decisions were made to make those meetings public very, very recently. They're working on a website with a link so that you can join the meetings and then the dates of the meetings. But they will be a listen-in type of structure or format. So just wanted to throw that out there for folks. And I can share the website link once it goes live so that y'all can get caught up to speed on what they're working on.
Great, thanks, Devin. And because next week we won't have a coalition meeting, if links are made available next week before the 4th, it'd be great to share that out through the mailing list, just so folks have a heads up ahead of that July 18th meetings planned. All right. So how about other good trouble announcements and success stories that folks would like to share this morning?
oh, I was going to say, Teresa has put in the thing about the next coalition social. The next coalition social is at my house, and you all need to come. And we're going to have fun. I got a little fire pit, and we can hang out and I'll make something. I don't know what, veggie dogs, sausages, something. You guys bring something to share if you want. You can hang out. You can bring your kids. We'll get some Legos out. I've got a train in my front yard. And yeah, just want you to come and have a good time. I'll send out some more information about the address and all that and get the website updated, but would love to have a bunch of you come and just spend some time in real life and talk about our lives or talk about homelessness or whatever we end up doing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking that on, Garrett.
The socials at Garrett's house are always wonderful events.
Maybe Garrett could even show off his ADU project.
That's right. You can see my half-built ADU. Maybe I'll get more done before then.
All right. Any other items for the good of the order that people want to share? All right. We are getting uncharacteristically quiet. So I don't know if I see Director Gant in the room yet, but we're a couple minutes ahead of the time that he said he would be available. But let me open the floor, see if any Pierce County folks know that if they see him under a different name. Maybe he'll be joining here in a couple minutes and we can just stall to get there. But what he's going to provide is a little more detail than what Garrett and I were able to provide last week from the briefing that was done with service providers across the county regarding the federal contract language that the county is unwilling and simply cannot sign related to the executive orders of the president. Um, any further context, Garrett, that you would add to what we asked Director Gant to share with us?
Nope. Except to introduce himself a little bit. This is hopefully going to be a chance for us to find out a little more about what makes him tick and what he's got in mind for the Human Services Department at the county.
Yep. and it's possible he's running late from another meeting or something like that, so that might be part of the delay.
I've got it. I'm messaging right now. I'm on it. We have that fancy little Teams thing we use in Pierce County, just like everybody else. So I just reached out to see if there's a delay.
Yeah, and obviously if it turns out that he can't make it today, we can always schedule it for a later time as well. So
So Daniel put a picnic in the park into the chat. And if anybody else has something that's coming up, that's a great place to put it because we save the chat. At least I do. A lot of us save the chat, and we can go back and find the announcements in there. I also saw that there was a comment in the chat about ADUs at mobile home parks. That's Carrie. So since we have a little time to kill, I think, anyone have anything to say about mobile home parks, the last bastion of low-income housing?
I would say it would be unusual to have an ADU built in a mobile home park. That most mobile home park owners do not own any of the units in the park. And their model is about renting out space where people can come and in theory go to. And so, but all of the design infrastructure is there. It would just depend on what that particular zoning would be around that park. It's not every mobile home park structured that way. Some have a different model to it, but that's the ones that I'm, aware of. My family has a mobile home park, so I know a little bit about how they like to operate it.
oh, and Daniel, ADU is the shorthand for accessory dwelling unit. So essentially it's a standalone small unit, usually built, on the property where there's already a primary residence.
You know what's really interesting about that is that, like, at our park, I have another acre of land and I could probably develop it. I don't think that I could make money off of it even with like a 15 or a 20-year, right? Like I'd probably have to look at 30 years in order for my capital investment to develop the mobile home sites in order for them to kind of pan out long term. Of course, we have ridiculously low rent. It's like $360 a month, which is like way less than any other community. So that's kind of part of our problem. But it's a real interesting challenge of just the raw costs of developing mobile home parks versus what that community is able to afford. But looks like Devin's got her hand up.
Yeah, Devin, real quick, let's go to Jay and then we'll pop over to you and move on in our agenda. Go ahead, Jay.
Part of the problem with an ADU in a mobile home park is that it's not mobile. Most mobile home parks, you have to be able to move the stationary object that you're using as a house. And so that's one of the controversies of it. And but good news on ADUs. Pierce County and other cities are really working on trying to streamline their permitting for ADUs. It's something that's come up in a lot of areas about how can we improve those areas because it's a major roadblock. Gig Harbor's looking at ADUs too. So there's a lot of room to bring this up right now because it is a big thing that is being discussed if you have the inclination to do so.
Thanks, Jay. And Devin.
Oh, I just wanted to say that Director Gant is here. That's it.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So, welcome, Director Gant. Thank you for joining us to share a bit about a bit of more detail regarding the federal funding challenges and how they are likely to impact services in Pierce County. And thank you for responding to Garrett's email that you joined us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. This is Gary Gant, and I serve as the Director of Human Services for Pierce County. And I've been in my position since June 2nd, and I really appreciate you all welcoming me this morning to your meeting.
Great. Garrett, would you like to kind of share a little bit about what we talked about last week and maybe how Director Gant could add to that?
Sure. But what I would love first is, okay, I'll run the interview. How about that? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Director Gant, and what brought you to Pierce County and some of the things you're excited about doing to support the homeless system in Pierce County and your team?
Yeah, you did get an option to do it. So
Yes.
you can log off or just keep your camera.
Okay. And unfortunately, my camera is off. So I guess I was supposed to, I tried starting that at the very beginning, but let me share some information about myself. Prior to joining Pierce County government, I served as the field office director for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. And I worked on a wide variety of issues throughout Washington state. And homelessness and housing, affordable housing, were two of my major priorities here in Washington state. And then prior to my position at HUD, I served as the Deputy Regional Administrator for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And I worked on a variety of issues, chronic health, behavioral health, homelessness. So my background is in community-oriented public health practice and in health administration. And the position here in Pierce County is allowing me to utilize, my skills and my experience in housing and in public health to address some of the issues, that we're facing right now. And, homelessness and affordable housing still is at the very top, along with behavioral health.
Cool. Anything else you're excited about at Pierce County, or you're still just sort of learning the land?
No. Well, I mean, I've actually worked with Pierce County Human Services in my role as the field office director for HUD, and I'm really excited about working with the providers and finding out, some of the resources, that are needed, but also making sure, that we have a unified regional approach, to addressing homelessness, and just to make sure that we do have an increase in affordable housing supply and that we're able to provide behavioral health services, along with, substance use disorder services, for our residents, and just making sure that you as providers, have an open line of communication, with human services, and just see how that we can collaborate in any way in the future.
Sounds good. We really appreciated the time that your predecessor, Director Moss, spent with the coalition and with a lot of us. So looking forward to a continuing partnership. So Rob and I talked a little bit about the briefing we sat in on that Ryan Mello and you presented at regarding the federal funds being in jeopardy. And I briefly outlined some of the things you talked about, like what could we as providers do. And I just thought maybe it'd be useful if you want to provide any context around that discussion. And I think maybe kind of highlight again some of the things that we can do and things that we ought to be paying attention to, and just any other kind of developments that have happened since that briefing. And I don't know if you want to take questions or not, but.
Yes. Well, let me provide a overview for those who were unable to attend last week's provider FAQ with County Executive Ryan Mello and myself. Right now, of course, the question is, why is the federal funding, in jeopardy? And the Trump administration has been adding, many unlawful new terms and conditions into all of our, grant agreements. And not only are they unlawful, and they definitely contradict the terms in the original funding opportunities, but these contracts are also intended to coerce us into enacting like extreme anti-DEI, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-immigrant ideologies. So many of you may not know, but Pierce County actually receives about $100 million a year in federal funds. So this is about 6% of the county's budget. Cancellation of the federal grants and programs combined with changing terms and conditions for federal contracts means that Pierce County is likely to lose most, if not all, of its federal funding. So if we accept the federal funding, we would be accepting the terms of these executive orders, which means that, we cannot reach out to certain populations, especially the marginalized, populations, that we would be discriminating against, certain individuals. And then one of the things that many people don't realize is that if we are found to be in noncompliance with these agreements, if we did sign the contracts, that we could be sued and that we could be fined and that we could be actually sued for perjury. So I know that it's a very difficult time for everyone, but we are really living up to the core values of Pierce County and to our mission and our vision as well. So right now, let me tell you what we're doing right now. So the county is currently conducting a risk assessment to understand the program analysis of how federal funding changes will affect our operations, how it will affect our subrecipients and the communities that we also serve. So we have federal funding in a number of programs across the county, everything from search and rescue funding and emergency management to criminal justice activities in the prosecuting attorney's office. We do know that the federal funds are essential to serving the most vulnerable people in our county. And we would love nothing more than to use these dollars, for their intended use, such as housing and transportation. But if the Trump administration succeeds in adding these terms and conditions, we will have to look at other options. As we have more information about the impact, we will be connecting with partners like you to move through this together. We are reviewing every contract one by one, just to make sure that there isn't any coercive language in those contracts. And, we have been able to approve some federal contracts within the last week. So there are some assurances, but then there are other contracts that we're not able to accept. And, that's where, we as a county, have to alert you to those changes, especially in federal funding. One of the things that I want to, share with you all is that we are making every effort to make sure, that the funding that we were receiving in the past, we're adding those to lawsuits. And, hopefully there will be an injunction which will allow us to use those funds once the agencies such as Health and Human Services or HUD makes changes to the contract based on the injunction. Okay, so there is a possibility that we may get some of the funding back, but there's no guarantee. I just want to share that with you all. And it's going to be important for providers to have contingency plans, for their agencies, to figure out a way to continue providing services to your the populations that you actually serve on a regular basis. And, we're doing everything possible that we can to go through the contracts and hopefully accept them. So now, some of the things that you can do right now is, of course, stay calm and show support and care for the people in your agencies and your clients. And then you all need to read your contracts very closely to understand their effects, and do not work without an executed agreement and invoice for services in a timely way as agreed in your contract. So if any of you all have outstanding invoices, please get them submitted to us as soon as possible. If you have any questions about an imminent contract or funding deadline, we're going to send you a link or provide a link where you can actually reach out to a county staff member to ask specific questions. And we also encourage everyone who receives federal funding to begin thinking about how to mitigate the possible losses of those funds. It will not be possible for the county and the state to restore everything. So this uncertainty is stressful and cruel, but we also know we will communicate as much information as we can and remain focused on serving those who will be most harmed by these federal actions. One thing that I also want to say is that Executive Mello has been very adamant that whatever we do, we will move forward together. Human Services supports this 100%, and we are already planning on having a provider convening or focus groups where we can dive into the potential impacts due to the loss of this funding. and start working together on solutions. And so that's what I mentioned last week at the FAQ session at the University of Washington, Tacoma. But that was also available via Zoom or Teams. So we also have an external facing webpage, and more will be available in the coming weeks, where the community can track litigation and review federal contracting FAQs. And we'll be sharing more information with you as it becomes available. At this time, I would just like to open it up to any questions that you may have.
So there's a question in the chat from Ms. Stewart. Her question is, can you explain the status of the lawsuits post the 2-week restraining order?
Okay, so we have several lawsuits in process. And so actually we have one in process right now, and that is the COC. So we may be able to accept the continuum of care funding, but there are some modifications that need to be made. And so, but we still do not have an agreement as of yet. And once we do have an agreement with HUD, we will share that information with you at that time. So presently the continuum of care agreement is under legal review, and we have to send our changes back to HUD. And if HUD does accept those changes, hopefully we will get funding for COC for this year. But that's still pending, and there's no guarantee regarding that.
So there's a follow-up to that question, and we'll get to you, Rob. Please be specific about the restraining order and its relationship to what is happening with HUD right now.
Okay, when you're saying the restraining order,
I have
please.
the same question in regards to Turner versus, and I'm sorry I don't have the rest of it. It is a legal approach currently in its third extension of 14 days. Other litigation has been added to it, and so I believe that it was extended again. We were hoping to hear exactly what part of the process we are in. Are we waiting for the rest of the counties to sign on? Have they signed on and we're just waiting for paperwork to work through? Is there another hearing in place? And if so, when is it? Specifics on what is happening in litigation currently, if possible.
Okay, well, I have noted that question, and I do not know at this time, but we can provide information to this group, and I will reach out to the legal team after this meeting.
All right, Mr. Huff.
Thank you again, Director Gant, for joining us. One of the questions that I have is just about timing. So in terms of when do we expect that the potential loss of this federal funding is likely to start hitting our providers and leading to, the potential of folks losing either the services or housing that they have in the county right now?
I can address that a little bit, Director Gant, if you would like, in terms of when the contracts begin and end and all of that detail.
That'd be great.
Okay. So our first contract so HUD contracts are scattered throughout the year. They are on a government year, right? But they're scattered throughout. So our first contract ended May 1st. That is a Share and Care project. And Share and Care had what we call match. And for those folks that aren't super nerdy about COC, the continuum of care requires that you have a 25% funding match for every project. They do receive those match dollars through the county. So they've been able to utilize those match dollars to pay rents for those folks that are in their units. So that is the short-term answer, Rob. And for the long-term answer, that is going to be up to folks that are making those leadership calls. But I wanted you to know it hasn't actually hit, unhoused or folks that are in programming yet.
Yeah, thank you. That's I think what I'm most, and I know that this is something that I presume Carrie's keeping an eye on as well, and the communication staff for the department, to kind of boil this down into language that's more understandable for the public, and so that we can explain the potential impacts. Thank you.
All right, next, Ms. Arnold.
Hi, you may have already addressed this, but I'm looking at the other funding sources more locally. How will that interact with, if we accept the federal funding, how will that interact with the funding sources that are available now or being used now? How will they have to manipulate their wording or whatever in order to comply with what the HUD wants them to do at the federal level?
Right. So what you accept independent of Pierce County, that's really based upon your, agency's needs. So we wouldn't have any, jurisdiction or any say in that. So, I mean, if you are accepting other types of funding outside of the funding that Pierce County is providing you, that's your decision. We have no oversight on that. Hopefully
I
that.
have a question for you, Director Gant.
Sure.
Are you going to look at prioritize? So say we lose the continuum of care funding. Will there be simply a reality that that funding's gone and so those programs will have to find funding elsewhere? Or will you potentially look at all of the programs you fund and all of your funding sources and decide to defund a shelter program, say with document recording fee money, and use that money to backfill the missing funding from the federal continuum of care grant? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. And I'm so glad that you asked that question. So behind the scenes here at Pierce County, we are looking at the outcomes of possible loss of federal funding, and we are prioritizing some of the programs. And we can't guarantee we cannot guarantee that we're going to, backfill, any funding, but we will prioritize those funding sources, that are needed in the community, especially to those individuals or populations that are most vulnerable. So we're doing that right now. We are doing that right now, just taking a look at what the effects of the loss of federal funding will have on certain programs within Pierce County.
So it's possible I could have a program that's operating homeless services that is not receiving federal funding, and I could end up having some of my county funding removed so that it could go to a higher priority program. Is that correct?
No. If you're receiving funding from a funding source that is stable, your funding will continue. We're looking at funding such as COC or the community development block grants right now. So those are probably the highest priority, especially as it affects your community. But if you're receiving funding from another source, we would not take funding from you and give it to another provider. So do not be worried about that. That's not going to happen.
So that basically means that the programs that may stop operating in our community are sort of random based on their funding stream and not intentional based on what would have the most impact to our community, which is fine. I'm just making sure I'm clear.
Right. So if you're receiving COC funds, as I stated earlier, that contract is under legal review right now, and we're going to send some language back to HUD, and hopefully they will send a contract back without language that is discriminatory, and we'll be able to accept the funds. So that's happening right now.
Right.
And then in regards to the community development block grants, that's going to be placed into a lawsuit because we cannot accept funding under the present terms and conditions that are stated in the community development block grant contracts. So that will be up, and hopefully that will be reviewed with they've been doing it fairly rapidly, like within 3 to 4 weeks. So hopefully there will be an injunction, saying that the language in those contracts are unlawful and that they have to strike that language. And hopefully, amendments will be sent back to Pierce County. We'll be able to sign, the revised version of the contract, and hopefully, hopefully, I can't guarantee, that we will be able to receive that funding. Hopefully
Yeah.
that.
Yes, I hope that's an optimistic approach instead of a wishful thinking approach.
Right. That's right. So we're going to send that, and we're going to add that to an ongoing lawsuit, especially the CDBG funds.
All right, we're nearing the end here. There's another question in chat. Rob, do you want to wrap up or take the last question?
We can maybe take the last one and then wrap it up. So Cynthia asked in the chat, Director Gant, how can the stakeholders and public participate in any county reprioritization process? And how will, and then my chat just jumped around. How will you work with the COC on these discussions?
Yes. Thank you for that question. And we will work collaboratively, with our partners in the community, and definitely with the COC. At this time, we are really just analyzing the legal landscape just to see where these lawsuits land. And in the interim, we will be in contact with our providers. And as I said, in the background, inside Pierce County, we are looking, at funding sources, possible sources just to make sure that, we can protect those agencies that are serving, the most vulnerable. And we are doing a prioritization list right now. So, one of the things I just want to provide assurances is that, we are, looking at everything. We understand your concerns, and we too want to make sure that we have services, for the most vulnerable in our county, and that you're able to continue doing the great work that you're doing in Pierce County.
Great. Well, thank you again, Director Grant Gant for joining us. And I do hope that you will take advantage of this group if you have an interest in filling us in on important information in the future. I know we wanted to bring you in just to do an introductory session here in July, and then this jumped up and provided this earlier opportunity. So I really appreciate your flexibility and willingness to join.
Oh, definitely so. And I do plan on joining you all for future meetings, because I want to make sure that, awareness of what your needs are, and that you're aware of what Human Services is doing to provide, resources to your group.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Take care. Goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That wraps up our time for today's meeting with a very meaty topic at the end of the meeting. If you have an interest in helping plan upcoming meetings, we'll do that in this room with a small group of us after about a 5-minute break. For everyone else, I want to remind you, next Friday, barring major weather issues or something like that, we will not hold a call because it's the 4th of July. We will be back here on July 11th. So thank you, everyone, and see you at the next one.